Hi, and we're live. I'm Karen Holst, and with me, I have my co-author of Start Within, Douglas Ferguson, and our guest this week, Kevin Nichols. Thank you
Hi.
so much for joining us. Yeah. Kevin, you are in my feed in LinkedIn with such inspiring information and posts about what's going on. You sit at the intersection of diversity and tech, and our social entrepreneur and trying to make a difference out in the world. And I want to just start with thank you for your work and what you do, and really also allow people here that are joining today. One, please put where you're from, where you're joining us from in the comments section. And also, as we're talking, if you have questions about how to bring diversity and inclusion to your organization, whether you're in a small team or a large company, we all have the opportunity to take on this work. And Kevin's going to talk to that. And if you have questions specifically you want to make sure we cover, add that in the comments as well. So let's kick it off. I'm just, briefly in what you do and looking around at the world today, what are you super excited and inspired about in doing this work?
I'm super excited right now about the moment that we're in. With all the political unrest that's taking place throughout the country, there's no better time to see the kind of change that needs to happen with regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion than now. So I'm very excited about that.
Yes, we all are feeling it, even from work from home, which I think presents its own challenges and how to make an impact. You're looking around and you're alone in your room, reaching out through the internet to try to make change. And in talking about that, what are some things that you're seeing traction and how people are getting involved and making a difference in this COVID moment where we're socially distancing and working more from home?
Well, since people are socially distancing, a lot of companies are relying on their Black employees primarily to kind of be their voice regarding what they should do regarding Black Lives Matter, regarding what steps they should be taking as an organization, as a company. So on one hand, that's been great for the conversation to start. However, a lot of these people are not equipped to really have those conversations. That's why my phone's been ringing lately.
Yeah, I mean, talk me through some of that. I've been talking with people about, getting uncomfortable and putting it out there and not worry. Well, we do want to have the right things said and the right approaches created, but it's also about making some action and taking some action forward versus waiting for everything to line up perfectly and saying the exact right thing. Instead, it's saying something that is right in the moment and continuing to tweak and improve as we move forward. And how do you help companies or people within companies that are just kind of spinning their wheels and wanting it to be all perfectly lined up? And how do we get started if it's not about perfection?
We have to understand first and foremost that diverse groups, diverse organizations outperform homogeneous groups. So understanding how to embrace your talent and get the best out of them, making them feel included and wanting to contribute to the organization is the hardest thing I think that companies are not doing well, that they could do well. And so doing that, focusing on that, you'll definitely get a lot more participation, genuine participation, and employees really falling in love with your mission and your values of your organization.
So I'm really curious, for individuals who think their organizations aren't doing enough, what are some good tactics that they could use to kind of stand up and break the silence in a way that doesn't seem inflammatory or might, create, because I think that folks have a lot of fear when it comes to like saying stuff. And then when they do, that fear manifests and then it doesn't come out quite so well. And they, what are some good tactics they can use to bring the stuff up in a careful way that progress can be made?
That's an interesting question. I think that for me, it's usually easy for senior leaders or an organization to kind of marginalize one individual bringing something to someone, but having conversations with coworkers, finding out from people that you work with as far as how they feel about the company, what things that they would like to see improved, et cetera. It makes it easier to have a couple of people that are on board, that are like-minded or similarly situated, such that they can bring something formally to, say, management or their supervisors or their leaders to be able to at least start the conversation. That way it doesn't get muzzled or get put on a shelf somewhere. But also there's real concern from management that this might be a bigger problem than they anticipated. And that way, I think that the climate right now is such that people are open to those conversations now, though, as they probably weren't maybe 2 or 3 months ago. So I think the climate is now open for that, and the timing is perfect.
It's great. I love this notion of building. It's like building a movement. There's this notion I love, is a spectrum of allies, right? And so rather than trying to convince your enemies way on the other end of the spectrum, who's nearby that might come along on this journey and help, be a bigger voice together. That's cool.
One of the great things of COVID is I've been able to binge watch. So I watched the whole entire Game of Thrones series. So I definitely can identify what you're talking about right now. So.
Game of Thrones, I love it. I'm behind on the season, so no spoilers for me, please.
No.
Yeah. So in thinking about, in Start Within, we talk about assumptions and how they can blindside our ideas actually coming forward. And you're talking about the allies and the stakeholders that you're bringing along. And I think that's really important to be disciplined about that, because when we're pushing an idea forward in new work, we typically find people that are like-minded to us, or other biases that get in our way of, finding people that we're attracted to for whatever reason. These are the types of people we like to work with. And the diversity being a key part of that. As you look at your stakeholders and who you're working with to make a new idea come together, it's stepping back and saying, who's not at the table? Who needs to be part of building the idea, part of pushing it forward? And every single one of us has this bias built in who we are. And so it's a discipline to reflect on that and say, how do I peel that away and start to bring other people to the table? And I think this moment is certainly reflective of that. And you brought up earlier on that the more diversity, the more success that you'll find within your organization. But how do you tell someone, when you're looking around at their teams, how do you inform them of either they do have those blind spots and they need to open up the diversity, or maybe it's not as obvious, but that it's in all of us? Like, how do you kind of peel away some of that?
Well, I think that it's important to look at employees as human beings first, and really looking at not necessarily what your skin color is or what your gender is, but how do you treat people that work for you and with you? And if you aren't like embracing the human aspects of who that individual is, it's kind of hard to appreciate where they're coming from, or other experiences that they bring to the table. I also think that it's important to look at diversity from a lens of connected to your bottom line. I mean, at the end of the day, this is not something that's fun and something that you just do haphazardly. You actually link this to your business, your product line, et cetera, and you link it to your revenue. Having a greater population of people that you're selling your products and services to are better decisions for your shareholders, for your revenue, and for you to be more successful as a company and as a business. If you're creating products that affect Black people and you don't have any Black designers or engineers or product managers in that space, you're missing out on what that aspect of their business is being missed and not captured from people who are going to purchase this product.
That reminds me of a story. I was at the Culturati conference. Gosh, it's about a year and a half ago now. And I'm forgetting her name now, but she's the head of diversity and inclusion for Target, I believe. Mm-hmm. She was on stage with the head of diversity from Twitter, and that was quite the dynamic duo. And anyway, she was telling this hilarious story about how, I guess it's sad on one level, but she was making it pretty hilarious that the shower at her hotel she was staying at here in Austin was racially insensitive. And the point of the story was to take it all the way back to not only the person that designed that shower, but the person who bought it. No one considered that this might be a problem. And I think it was, sure, everyone was laughing, but I think it was a wake-up call for a lot of folks to realize that this is a problem when we think about products and how we take stuff to market.
Exactly, including athletes. You'll hear a lot of athletes complain that they'll go into a hotel. This shower is made for a 5'5" person. I'm 6'8".
Yeah,
it's crazy. So but I get the sentiment.
So what resources can people start looking toward to start taking the right steps forward? Obviously, there's lots of books that I've been seeing in my feed from many people, and you included, but where are some points of inspiration that people could start turning to?
That's a good question. I believe that there is a heightened sense of where people can go and get educated about things. A point that I wanted to make is that a lot of times, and I mentioned this earlier, that a lot of Black employees or Black people in general are like the representatives of the entire race and feel as though they have to educate everyone around them on how to interact with Black people. There are a lot of resources, and I applaud the companies like Netflix, Comcast, and Xfinity, and et cetera, where they're making these playlists or reading lists, et cetera, for people to kind of educate themselves on what it's like to grow up Black in this country, whether they're movies, documentaries, books, et cetera. Easily, you can Google that as well for lists from that. But right now, I'm reading a book called How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, professor, I think in Boston. Great book. It basically talks about having to choose a side. Either you're racist or you're anti-racist, but there's no in between. So understanding the differences, understanding how to make decisions about what you say and what you do, and what the ramifications of that are, and how you can be more cognizant about making good decisions and good choices regarding that.
Yes, I'm waiting for my How to Be an Anti-Racist Baby. I think it's just called Anti-Racist Baby, by the same author, to come in. It's a board book, so I haven't gotten to see it yet, but introducing it early to my son.
It's a great series, a great book, and he's blowing up all across the country. But there are tons of books out there, but at the same time, it's reading them and then having conversations about what you're digesting, but not relying on your Black friend to be the filter for that, but really doing the work on your own.
It was a few months before COVID. It was probably fall of last year that I stood up at a software company and recognized the lack of women and diversity in general in the room, not even just in leadership, but certainly in leadership. And it was a very uncomfortable thing to point out on stage in front of everybody. After that, I did it in a respectful way that people got there, very smart, PhDs, experts in their field, but this is not how we're going to go into the future. And how do we rethink building the organization that we want to be a part of, that builds for the people that we want to be a part of? And, I go up on stage, very uncomfortable as a white woman saying all of this, and get off the stage, and just had so many people come up to me and say, thank you for talking about it. What can we do next? And we started to talk about the next phase. Just like putting it out there and saying it was a big part of this. And it doesn't have to be a Black person to make that point. Or in this case, talking about women, it doesn't have to be a woman. But I think that we get held up in not having the right perspective because we aren't in the community that is affected by it, and wanting to wait for that person to do it. And that's not how. We all have to be part of the change. And I love that you're highlighting that. And it's, I think, empowering that we all have the opportunity to affect it.
Well, I think that allyship is the most important thing that people can do if you're not a member of this particular race that's dealing with these issues. And by allyship, I mean, you can't be silent. There's whether it's how to be an anti-racist, or it's also about how to be an ally. An ally is not someone that sits around and watches injustice happen around them and not do anything about it. So you have to be vocal. You have to speak up, especially if you're in a position of power, and help those who are powerless. That's what I think would be the biggest takeaway right now for your listeners to be able to implement today, if they chose to do that.
And before we go off on this, I would love for you to share a bit more on the Social Engineer and the work that you're doing.
Great. Well, the Social Engineering Project is an organization that I started 4 years ago with Dr. Brian Brown. He's a professor at Stanford. And our whole goal is to introduce traditional STEM, so math, science, chemistry, physics, and engineering, to underrepresented students of color, getting them interested in math and science, and hopefully going to college and majoring in something STEM and eventually working in the tech industry to address the lack of diversity in the tech industry. So that's the organization. Our website's in the comments, but it's www.thesocialengineer.org.
Yes, thank you for that work and everything you're doing and putting out there.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, so great to have you on the show today, Kevin. I really enjoyed it, and hope to talk to you again soon. And just wanted to close by saying that if you're interested in checking out more of these, we're here every Friday, and we'd love to have you as a guest. We have guests every Friday come on and talk about the book and about how they're doing great work to change the way the world works. And thanks again, Kevin. It was great to have you.
You're welcome. Have a great weekend.